Okay, so Advalian, I'm assuming that's how you say your TikTok name, has been giving me some thoughts, and I think it's so interesting. So, you could go through the video threads to kind of figure it out. But the TLDR is I was talking about the different places that I grew up in Canada, in the suburbs surrounding Toronto, and this guy decided to mention that all of those were Toronto. And I made a video where I was basically saying, well, like, not everybody would agree that all of those suburban areas are Toronto. And so he's replying now. And in the comments, for some reason, it wasn't letting me video reply to the comment that you just put up. But it says, he writes, LMAO, when I was a kid, the consensus outside of Toronto was, if it's within an hour of the Greater Toronto area, it's Toronto. And then people from Toronto would go red in the face, lol. And then he writes, me personally, I would say that the government of Canada should just give all the land back. Gotcha, LMAO. Oh, okay. Well, see, that second comment takes us in a whole other direction, but let's start with the first one. The second last comment you mentioned, because I already replied to the first one that you wrote. I agree with you, because I remember when I was a kid, everybody used to say they were from Toronto. Like, if they were from Pickering, they'd say they're from Toronto. If they're from Barrie, they're saying they're from Toronto. If they're from Oakville, Burlington, they're saying they're from Toronto. Like, everybody was saying they were from Toronto, right? But that said, I feel like cities in the Greater Toronto area have started to get their own personalities now. You know, like, Mississauga's gotten very metropolitan. In the years since I've been there, it's really grown and it's really expanded. It has its quiet areas, it has its downtown core. Like, it's a really poppin' city. You know, Brampton has its own personality. When I was there first, they never used to have such a robust bus system. Their transit system has gotten so good. I remember when I was like a teenager waiting for the bus, I used to cry at the bus stop. I used to cry and repent of all my sins and beg for Jesus to forgive me, because I was like, what other reason could there be why it is blistering cold out here and the bus hasn't been here in over an hour? Like, oh my goodness. Oh, those days were torture. But like, yeah, I totally hear that 100%. But yeah, now that these cities are starting to grow, now that more people are starting to live there, now that they're starting to get their own vibe and their own cultures, I think people are starting to resist just being grouped under the Toronto umbrella. And I think Toronto's a really proud city, and it's been around for hundreds of years. And I think there is a little bit of a push to distinguish themselves from the other smaller communities, kind of holding on to their coattails. I'll say though that it'll be very hard for smaller cities to really differentiate themselves from Toronto when they still rely on Toronto for their economic growth and development. And what I mean by that is that most cities outside of Toronto require their populations to commute back into the downtown Toronto core in order to have jobs, for people to make a living. Most of these cities don't have their own factories, don't have a good amount of factories, don't have a good amount of office buildings, don't have a good amount of financial districts, things like that would really help to build their own communities. They'd rather just build homes and strip malls, and then everybody commute to downtown Toronto to work, and then everybody commute back out of Toronto for their job. And until they're willing to say, hey, we want to build our own economic core in our city, it's going to be really hard to make that differentiation. Now, in terms of you saying that the government of Canada should give all the land back, do you mean they should give all the land back to the Indigenous people? That, you know what, I'm not going to lie to you, when I was in high school, I kind of thought that way. I thought, maybe Canada should just give all the land back. At this point, I don't see that working. I've really, do I want to go there? first of all, Canada is a recognized country around the world. I don't think people would recognize different bands of First Nations who claim specific areas within Canada. I think it would be a very difficult conversation to address the displacement of people who have come here and have made this country their home. And please don't go back and harass the guy. I think it was just a comment, an offhanded comment, but it kind of rolls back to my conversation on Canada and Canadian identity, and I would like to discuss it. If we can discuss it without people running back and dragging this guy for filth, that'd be great. But I think that's a really complicated answer, because you realize not everybody who came to Canada came willingly, right? There are some people who came to Canada through the transatlantic slave trade. There are some people who came direct to Canada from the transatlantic slave trade. Some of them came to the Caribbean. Like, some slaves went to the Caribbean, were moved to Jamaica because they were too unruly, and they still couldn't be controlled, and then they were shipped to Nova Scotia. You know? There are also some slaves that ran from the United States and ran into Canada, right? And, like, yes, they chose to go to Canada, but they didn't choose to come to this side of the world. You know, there could be so many different stories and histories that are intertwined with people's reasons to come to Canada. Like, a lot of people come to Canada these days due to war and political asylum and things like that. It's there's so many reasons why people come to this country, and for us to just say, oh, well, let's just give over the land back, like, how would that even work in terms of displacing all the people that have and are coming here? You know, how would that even work with all the people that have made a life and a legacy here to have to go back where they've originally come from? I will say that there needs to be more done in terms of the Indigenous community in Canada. Back when I was watching APTN in high school, and I really do need to get back on their podcast, because they used to talk a lot of very interesting things about the Indigenous community that I really didn't know about. So I really need to get back on Native Talk and really dig more into that. But a lot of the places where Indigenous people live, there's substandard education, there's high access to DRUGS, there's low sanitation, low access to water, low access to education, if I haven't said that already. Like, there's high rates of poverty, high rates of the S word, SUICID, high rates of that, high rates of the is it MMIG? No, MMIWG. A lot of cold cases impacting women in the Indigenous community. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of struggles and a lot of oppression that has faced the Indigenous community. And for us to just be like, oh, well, we're just going to leave now. Here you go. Take it and figure it out. Like, that would be quite a daunting task. You know, that whole transitioning process. Like, I think we're too far gone as a nation for us to just give up the reins and give them the space and leave. And I know there's a lot of people on this app that are talking about a certain country that's identified by watermelons, or a certain state. It's not necessarily a recognized country, but a certain region of the world, I'll say, that's recognized by watermelons. And I've studiously avoided talking about them. But, like, let's say right now that the 6-star country decided today to just leave and let them have the space. Would they be able to run it? Would people allow them to stay in that place without trying to take it over? Would people recognize them as a sovereign nation and deal with them accordingly? Like, there's so many nuances that come with these kind of conversations, you know? And I'm thinking, like, do I even want to wade into something like that? I don't know. I don't know if I want to. I don't want to get too controversial on this app, because I hear they're starting to yeet accounts that talk about stuff like that due to the new ownership to come. So I don't even know if I want to go there, but it's an interesting thought experiment when you apply it to the context we were speaking about